Good morning, or good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you are. We are joined with people from around the world. Welcome to the next ARMSA webinar in this series. The renewable industry has been through a transformational decade. However, the focus on reducing costs and investing in digital asset management is taking the attention away from how companies invest in another crucial area: how best to improve skills amongst employees who plan, design, build, manage, maintain wind farms. This is an element often forgotten in the drive to run projects optimally. Now, in our first webinar, 74% of respondents confirmed that their businesses rely more on people and their experience than established systems. Global forecasted renewable CAGR suggests that this trend is going to become commonplace. Good morning again, or midday, afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Jan van Delsen. I'll be your host for today. It gives the ARMSA Academy team and me immense pleasure to bring you our second webinar in the Thinking Manager series. Now, most people don't know me, so let me just very, very quickly tell you a little bit about myself. Believe me, this will not be the Jan van Delsen show. It will be a completely different show. Just quickly, my role is actually CEO of Inmissio and Associated Learning. We are a business partner for ARMSA Academy. My background is in training, e-learning, learning technologies. And I'm a huge fan of actually blended learning and online learnings with scalability, etc. However, that's my working life. I also have a real life. I'm a father, I'm a partner. I like cycling in the weekends, and yes, I like tennis and golf, but I'm terrible at it. I still persist with it, though. Okay, let's talk about other things. Let's talk about how renewable organizations look at the future. Because the future will look very different than they look today, of course. Without preparation, we continue to risk energy security, safety, and medium to long-term return on investment. Whether you represent an existing renewable organization or a new market entrant, the reality is that few companies can afford to cling blindly to the business models of the past. Developing and embedding tacit knowledge right at the very start is crucial if increased dependency on individual experience is unavoidable. Now, designing renewable businesses that foster robust organizational learning across their value stream is the key to unlocking the renewable organization of the future. And that is an important part. If we look at learning, organizational learning, it's no longer a dark art, of course. Learning science progressed leaps and bounds in the past decade too, and there is firm evidence that effective application of front-end loaded decision-making reduces the project cost by 10%, delivery time quite often by 7%, and material project changes by 5%. In the room with us today is someone whose work has already realized these efficiencies for the global organizations that he has led. And we are fortunate that he will be sharing with us the impacts of organizational culture and design on asset performance and part of our decision-making webinar series. So thank you. It's no more as pleased than I am to introduce to you Jimmy Hansson. And I will tell you more about you. Jimmy has more than many years of experience in the renewable sector, armed with extensive international experience and having held very senior roles, several senior roles within global businesses. I think that Jimmy has seen it all and probably solved it too. Previously, Jimmy was the EVP for and global head of asset management at Sonadix, which is a global IPP. Focusing on cost, performance optimization, supporting M&A activities. He's also fulfilled roles as the COO, for example, for Cubico Sustainable Investments, and had a mixed portfolio of wind, PV, CSP, so really has a broad experience in our industry. I could tell you many more parts of background for Jimmy, but let me give him the floor. And Jimmy, it's all yours now.
Thank you very much, Jan, for the kind words. And let me see if I can share my presentation here for you.
I will stop my share for you. Just last words before Jimmy starts. We will have the opportunity to ask Jimmy some questions. So please put in all your questions in the chat or Q&A in this Zoom platform. We will take all these questions at the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you very much, and welcome to you all. I will be talking a bit about organizational culture and how it works in practice, and give you at least my view on how this actually works in practice. So I will take you through the topics and agenda for today's webinar. So I will make a very quick introduction to myself, but the more interesting parts comes in the next slides, of course, and the next part of the webinar, where we were talking about actually what defines an organizational culture. Another question is, where does it apply? And then I will also give you an insight to the way I see organizational maturity and how that actually have an impact on a culture as well, but also on how and what we need to think about when we work in a larger organization that spans over more than one country, but also have a number of different business areas and functions as well. The next part is how it actually, or does it have an effect on asset and safety performance? So I will go slightly into that as well as part of this webinar. And then I will give you a few examples from my experience and where I have reflected over how this can actually have an impact, a positive impact on this as well, and in practice then. So I will give you a few examples of that. And then hopefully I will be able to give you a few key takeaways that you can use at your own organization, or at least give you an insight so that you can reflect over to see if this actually works in your organization, and something that you can recognize in the way that your teams are structured and the way that you operate as well. So who am I then? So Jan kindly gave you some good introduction to myself, but my name is Jimmy Hansson. I'm Swedish. I've lived in London for 10 plus years. I'm actually moved back to Sweden now for, 2 years ago. So I run my own company called Ecovento, where I provide a number of different services, most advisory services, but we also provide financial asset management services to renewable assets in Sweden. So my experience comes from a number of different generating facilities. So I basically grew up and developed through a nuclear industry in Sweden. And then when Sweden took a decision to start the decommissioning, I actually moved to the green side. So that was back in 2007. So I worked with offshore wind and onshore wind and CSP to some extent, but also in the last, I would say, 7 years, I've been exposed to solar as well, in different roles in different company, and globally, I would say as well, which is quite important for this perspective when we talk about organizational culture. So I worked basically around the industry and the sector. So I've had experience from utilities, been on the OEM side, worked with Vestas in Sweden, I've also been with large IPPs, Cubico and Sonetics, and also with fund managers such as Greencoat Capital. So I believe I've been exposed to most of the problems that an organization would see, but also problems within specific areas as well when you actually start to operate and build these kind of assets as well in the sector. And part of my role in these companies has been to actually build high performance teams. So when you established a site, organization plays a key part as well, and to build that for the future has been part of my responsibility. And this has also been in quite a few countries in most part of the world. I have held executive roles which have allowed me to see things from a different perspective, and also been able to support the teams who is performing the real activity on the site level as well. So but it's a bit more than just work for me as well. I mean, I have a family of 4 with 2 adult kids. I'm quite passionate about nature. So as soon as I have time and opportunity, I take our RV and we go up to the mountains in Sweden for hiking and fishing. I also have a dog, an English Springer Spaniel with a lot of energy. He's only 1 year old, so he requires quite a lot of attention and training. So he keeps me minded that we need to go out as well to explore the nature, which is fantastic. I have I would say a big passion for motorcycles. I've been riding motorcycles for most part of my life, and especially sports bikes. I've been an instructor on track days and try to help people to get to understand how they can get the best use of the motorcycles as well. But I would probably say the biggest reason for doing those kind of activities to get the adrenaline boost, which I really enjoy. So that's me. And so now let's move into the real topics for today. So what actually defines an organizational culture? So, I mean, in my view, there's a lot of things that creates a culture within an organization. So we have the people within the organization. We have the organization as such. So, and of course, it could be the same thing, the people and organization, but it's also how it's structured. We have the environment and atmosphere where people actually work and collaborate within the company. Another important part is the leadership that we have in the company. But more important could be values and beliefs that we have as well, but also standards and policies. And for me, this is quite important aspects to think about when we look into the organizational culture, because all of this plays an important part. And I think from my perspective, when we look at building an organizational culture, is that we need to try to find some sort of shared values and be aligned in the way that we work. And you should also try to identify that you can, sorry, let me rephrase that. You need to also try to be able to identify yourself with the company. If you move to an office which is outside of where your normal workplace is, you should feel that you can recognize not just the office as such, but also the way that we work, the way that we communicate, and also have a leadership style that spans over all the different business area, which is aligned and similar in the way that we work on. So my view here is that this is key parts of building this organizational culture. So Jan was mentioning also that we will actually run polls here as well to get is for you to get to see if and see where we have alignment in as well. So we would run the first poll now. I think that concludes the poll. So let's move on to the next slide then. So where does the organizational culture apply? So the culture is, of course, where is in the company, and that's what we're trying to achieve here. But it actually cuts across all the different areas within the company, all the different functions that you normally see. And so basically, it's the entire company. So it's important that we're not singling any part of this out, which could be quite easy, that we try to apply a certain kind of culture in the way that we do operations or engineering constructions, or that we have a finance team that is not really involved in the operational stuff. So this is something we try to avoid. So it's important that we have actually shared targets and shared values across the entire company in order to create a solid and robust culture within the organization. But it's not just the internal part of the company. To some extent, it's also the external stakeholders that is part of this. Of course, we can't influence them to be part of our culture, but what I'm trying to say here is that an external stakeholder will be able to recognize your company and the way that you work, what kind of standards you use, how you communicate within the company, and how you actually perform work. And so they feel comfortable when they actually speak with whoever part of the company that they approach to. So I think this is plays important part, both the internal and external stakeholders. So is it possible to change? So if you come into a company and you see actually this culture is not really aligned, and it's not really call it solid and working in a positive way that you want to see this culture to work. So can we change this? And the question here is, the answer is yes, I think you can. I think the important thing is that you need to work on focusing on something that you can share. So values and beliefs, the targets for the company, and try to build from there. And then eventually you will be able to change the culture to something which is more in line with your business objectives and the way that you want to present yourself to your external stakeholders as well. So of course, the culture can be changed. So, but it's not always we want to change the culture. So it could be that we have a certain profile within the company that we actually want to keep remained as well, because it's part of the historical values that the company was built on as well. It could be an entrepreneurial spirit that we want to maintain, or it could be other things as well. So the next part of this is around the organizational maturity. So for me, this plays an important part because it gives you an understanding on what to focus on in order to establish a certain culture as well. So when we go through the steps here, you will probably understand where I'm trying to get to. So you have, when you join a company, you're going through different stages here. You have the learning, you have the applying, you start to embed procedures and policies into the organization. And then you start to realize that actually you can improve this, you start optimizing it. And then the last step is when you get to the innovating stage. And this is actually building the awareness for a new joiner in the company, or when you start up a new company as such, you have to go through all of these steps anyway. And then when you're at the next step, you're actually in the development phase and building the competence. And once you then have the competence in place, you can then move into the more innovating and where I think everyone wants to be, to perform excellence as well. So I put some boxes in here in order to be able to measure your organizational maturity. It will stay here for a while, so you will be able to read it. I will not read it out. But actually the key thing in order to measure this is what kind of policies or processes do you have in place at your company? And the next step then, has the organization a basic understanding of the requirements of this kind of strategy, and has decided to actually to apply these as well. And the second level here is then when you actually have a good idea on how you want to implement and embed this into your day-to-day work. And then the fourth one is actually now you have all the elements of the strategy are in place. You have the policies, you have the standards, you have the processes on how you want to operate, you have the framework in such, and even the management system is now fully completed as well. And then you have the fourth level. So now, and the last one. So now you're using these policies, but now you have a really, really good understanding on what the meaning of the policies and procedures are. So now you can actually start to think on how you can really take this to the next level by going beyond the requirements of this and pushing the boundaries. And that's where you get to this place. And I think this is something we all want to be at, and that means operational excellence. So the next part of this, when it comes to organizational maturity, is actually to see where do a normal organization sits, and why is this the case? So we will be looking at how an organization actually performs. So in the first 3 steps, an organization is normally quite reactive in their approach. And when you have started to come to the operational excellence side, you become a bit more proactive in your approach on how to do things as well. You know what the next steps are and what you need to think about. You know the potential risk that you can be exposed to. So you basically start to manage that at that stage. In the early stage, reactive is, as we all know, is that we start something up and then you run into a problem. You need to stop. You need to solve the problem, and then you continue. And that costs money, it costs time. So ideally, we want to move as quickly as possible through these kind of steps within an organization. And this is probably somewhere in here between is probably where you see most of the companies. And there is a reason for that. And it could be many different cases. So one thing could be that the company is in extreme growth, high growth. And it's not just in the portfolio of megawatts as part of our sector. It could be that you have a large growth in your organization, which means that you need to onboard a number of new people, which means that everyone that starts has to go through this learning cycle until they're fully familiar with the processes and the standards and policies that the company actually have, and can then push the boundaries and perform as part of the operational excellence where we want to be. But it could also be a certain structural decision that we find with this. Actually, we think this is cost beneficial to us. So we now have solid processes, standards that we want to adhere to, and actually push the liability to someone else. So if something happens, it's not really our problem. It could be someone else. So you move through this kind of decision making as well. But ideally, we should come to a level where we are at least at level 3, even if we have a large part of our work outsourced to other companies as well performing the task. So the next part of this is actually how is this linked to the organizational culture. Well, once you get all of this in place, coming back to what we talked about earlier about standards and policies, creating a certain environment for people to work in, and so on and so forth, we actually have something that we can share. We have a strong alignment within the organization that we can recognize across everything that we do. So by using the same standards and system is quite important at this stage. We also have the same kind of leadership style across the company. So we know how to take decisions. We know how to do change management if necessary as well. And we certainly have shared targets and goals for the company. So, and I think this is how it can influence and impact the organizational culture. So, well, the key question then is, does this have an effect on asset and safety performance? So yes, is my honest answer. So I'm not sure how many of you were on the first webinar where we talked about the social culture, but being aware of the social culture and organizational culture often means that the organization becomes more effective and efficient with a safe outcome. And I would say the more diverse you are and the more inclusive you are of people's values and beliefs, actually strengthen the culture as such, and you learn a lot. You will be able to optimize the way that you're working in a very positive spirit. And having this in all the different areas and sectors where you work, it will actually enable alignment within an organization. So what is then the enablers here, and how can we get this effect on asset and safety performance? So if you ask me, the enablers here are quite, I would say, obvious to most of your people, but I think it's important to reflect over them. So we need to have frequent communications within the organizations, both formal and informal. So we need to have structured meetings in place, but also having this chat around the coffee machine or at site with the people in order to understand where we're actually working. So we then understand where we're heading. The other thing is to have a clear and structured procedures in place, because that means that we will do the same things regardless where we are in the world. So again, creating this alignment in the way that we want to strengthen it as well. Another key thing is clear responsibility and accountability within the organization. So we should always know who to go to, because we should know who's actually responsible or accountable for a certain activity and task, so they can support and help you. And I would also say a common understanding of the target and the goals. So what do we actually want to achieve? What is the goals that we want to achieve for this year as well? So we can share that, so we can all work in the same direction in all the different functions and areas as well. And another enabler, which I think is key here, is that you'd have a lot of cross-functional collaborations. So we need to understand there's a lot of value which is in the experience of all the people that you have. And it might not be obvious for everyone, but once you start to have this kind of cross-functional collaboration, you really understand that you will have really important value or input coming from the finance team, potentially in a construction site, because they might have seen it. They might have seen other difficulties than you don't see immediately. The same way could be that you bring in operations people during the development and the construction engineering, but also the opposite. So when you are in operations, the people who has actually built the sites have a lot of knowledge that they can share. So I think everyone here has a value within the organization, and it's important to try to extract their experience and knowledge as much as possible. And the last one here is the shared values and beliefs. So what is then the outcome, and what are the key drivers here, and what do we want to increase, as we say here? Well, we will get higher efficiency within the company if we have this in place. We don't need to look for who we should speak to in order to have a decision made. We don't need to question the targets and the goals. We don't need to potentially hire a consultant to come in to help you with a certain task. That experience might already exist within your company as well. So that creates effectiveness as well, and also cost effectiveness. So don't underestimate that. And of course, having this in place and actually being aware of your risk at a very early stage means that you will also increase the safety. So if you have good, strong, rigid processes in place for this, the safety will be improved on your workplace for sure. Quality is also another part which you will see an impact on as well if you implement these enablers as early as possible in your organization. And last but not least, the performance. So I'm not sure if you agree with me, but we will run a second poll here. So I will start in a few seconds, and then it would be there for 20 to 30 seconds, and then we continue with the presentation. So now we will go into next step here. So, and I will give you some experience from my my past as well. So talking about organizational culture in practice. So where to start? So I think it's important, I said it earlier as well, I think you need to identify an area where that actually impacts the entire company. So I will use health and safety and environment, HSE, as we also know it, because this plays a quite important part across all the part of the organization, not just on the work sites, it's also in the offices. And this is also where we can build on training and learning within the organization. So we actually apply a certain way of working, call it a structured way of dealing with activities and planning and all those things as well. And why is this? Because for me, it has a direct impact on the company's performance and with an immediate effect on the outcome as well. Because I mean, if we do this wrong, there might be an impact on reputation, and that will have, I would say, potentially severe damage to organizational culture. So it's important that we have this focus. And I will just give you an example here. So we probably have a lot of attendees from different parts of the sector, but my experience then having worked in company where you actually have development, you have engineering constructions, and then you have the operations of a project. So basically it spans over the entire life of a project. Then HSE becomes even more relevant to you, because when you start to develop a project, it's quite important that you bring the experience and the knowledge from the people who have operated projects, similar projects for long term, so they know the potential risks and things that you might be exposed to at the very early stage if you bring the knowledge in. And even more important is then the engineering construction. So they will give you a good understanding on how to build your project in the future as well. So for me, it's always been important to try to build cross-functional teams that support each other through the different phases of a project. So it's not that, let's say that the development team ends their part of the business, hand over to engineering constructions, and then they build the project and then throw the keys to operations, and then they operate the project for the life. So for me, it's more important to ensure that you have this kind of support from in the development phase, both from engineering construction and operations. And when you're engineering construction, you get support from development and from operations. So basically part of your activities could be performed by your operations team. And when you are in operations, you should certainly utilize the experience that sits with the people that have built the project. I know these guys will move on to potentially a new project and be extremely busy of it, but I think they also have some, they're probably quite proud of building a good project for you as well. So I think they want to share the knowledge. So, and using this, it actually enables front-end loaded and informed decisions for organization. So that means you will become more cost effective. You can cut quite a lot of time in building these products as well, because you know what kind of risk you might be exposed to, and you might be able to plan it in a much better way as well. So this again for me has been one of the first areas I focus on when I establish an organization, to get the health and safety part in that, to build the procedures and structures so we can work on that. And to use an example from one of the companies here is, that I used to work for, is that I used actually Arms Academy to come in and do training for both our product managers and asset managers. So they at the same training session, so they understand the potential risk in both phases of a project. And by doing that, you actually increase the awareness on why operations might ask for something, but also the opposite, why engineering construction might want to do a certain thing, a certain task in a certain way as well. So it increases the awareness within the company by having these kind of shared sessions. So it's either by training or by putting together cross-functional teams. The next example is around management system. Same thing there as health and safety. Management system cuts across the entire business. So again, if we look at this, it goes through all the areas. And when it comes to management system, for me, leadership becomes very important, that you have that in place, that you use the same standards and policies as part of your management systems as well is important, and that the organization actually adhere to this and follow this as well is also critical. And of course, this is part of the wider organization within the company as well. So finance, M&A, project management, legal, engineering, construction, health and safety, operations, asset management. There might be some areas I missed there. I do apologize for that. If we have any attendees from any department that they belong to that is not represented here. But I think you understand what I'm trying to get to here, that it's important that you build this across the company, but also allowing for the leadership, then allowing the organization to raise concerns and challenge if you see that you can do something in a different way, so you can evolve and develop and optimize. So this is quite important from the call it organizational maturity scale that we talked about earlier. So having that kind of openness within a company means that you can evolve quicker. And and when it comes to this, so I didn't mention that when we talked about organizational maturity, but I think it's an important point. For me, there is no shortcut to get operational excellence. You have to go through the steps that I explained there in one way or another. In some companies, you can then really fast forward the first 3 or 4 parts of it, but then you have to allow time, and you have to allow this kind of openness within the organization in order to evolve and in order to establish operational excellence at the end. And when you are at that stage, I can assure you that you feel that you belong to a certain organization with a certain culture, and where you then can recognize yourself and be proud of it as well. So I will now wrap this up. Time is short, so we need to have some time for Q&A in the end as well. So I will give the time back to Jan at the later point here. But so just to summarize this, what then defines an organizational culture? Well, for me, the most important part here is the people and the leadership, and that we actually have shared values and beliefs. So those 3 together is probably the key part of developing and maintaining a certain culture within an organization. We will see the result from the poll later on. I think it will be sent out to you, so you will have a better understanding of how the tendency here have answered to that. Where does it then apply? And as we said, it's actually within the company for sure, but the way to measure this is actually by external stakeholders. They will tell you if you do things differently within your company, if they're exposed to other part of your business. So, but it's in the end of the day, it's the company that needs to have the same culture and build on the same culture. And on the organizational maturity, so again, coming back to it, for me, there is no real shortcuts here. So remember that. I mean, when you bring people on board, even if there are really high skilled people who have done this for many years, they still need to go through these learning steps before they can really execute on the position. Because the reason for that is because you might use different kind of procedures and policies. So allowing them to review and reflect over that and put themselves into it means that they will also give you feedback on the way that you're working in order to improve. That means that once they've gone through these first steps, you will then be able to push the boundaries and reach that operational excellence. Sorry. So don't assume because someone have done this in the past that they understand exactly how your company is working. They might know how to build a PV plant or a wind farm and be excellent at that. They might know how to operate the plant as well. But it's important also that they understand the way that your company is doing this as well, because that will actually help you to get even more value from the individual that you hire. And does it have an impact on performance, asset and safety? Well, as I said earlier, for me, it's quite obvious. It's a big yes on that. So if you do this right, you will see that the company will be able to be more efficient. It will be able to take decision which is based on facts and informed, and hopefully also quite in the beginning. So you front end most of the decision there and then build on that. And then culture in practice, where to start. And just to go back to that, use something that impacts the entire company, something that cuts across all the different part of your business, because then you can quicker get to this alignment and building on that to create your own culture within the organization in any way that you want to form it. So and thank you all for attending this webinar. I hope I was able to give you something meaningful and something to reflect on, and that this actually makes sense to you as well. So thank you all. I will hand over to Jan for a Q&A session now.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. A very enlightening presentation, and thank you for sharing your information and experience on this. We do have some questions from the audience. I think it might be prudent actually if we give people the opportunity as well to ask their question in person. This is a live service, so is it possible to give Nick the opportunity to ask their question live by opening the microphone?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Hi, it's Nick Anagnost here from Glenmont Partners. Well, first of all, thanks from my end as well for a very informative presentation. It's very illuminating to see what Jimmy's experience has been with affecting organizational change in the workplace, and I think it's something that sometimes, especially from my point of view, I'm a performance engineer, so always trying to optimize systems. Sometimes we need to remember that there's a larger system that we are part of as well, which is the organization itself. So my question is has to do with the distinction between responsibility and accountability, because I've come across it a number of times, and it would be really useful if Jimmy could shed a bit of light on how to differentiate between these two concepts.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the kind words as well. So I mean, my view on responsibilities and accountability, I think it's important that it has to be very clear. It has to be clarity around who is in the end of the day, accountable for delivering a certain task. And it needs to be so clear that we should have a name on it as well. So people can go and ask for decision, because the person who is accountable is also the person who should take the decisions in the end of the day. When it comes to responsibility, underneath accountability, you would always have someone working in an organization that have responsibility to ensure that a certain task is delivered to a certain budget or to a certain quality in an organization as well. So it has some accountability, but in the end of the day, is basically the accountable person giving their responsibility to its organization to deliver it. But if you need to change or take a decision, you should be able to go up again. I hope this helps. Nick.
So just as a follow-up, would you say that the responsible person is the one with whom the buck stops, and the accountable person is the one who has to do the actual task, or vice versa?
It's the vice versa for me.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah. So.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick, for joining in the conversation. And I would like to give opportunity to one more person to join in the conversation who also had a question. Jose Neto, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you for the presentation. Interesting. So my question is, I work mainly in the IPP sector, and I'm curious for a statement that you made that we should have cross cooperation alongside the development, the construction and operation. And I would like to hear your thoughts on actually how that is done, because from my experience, mainly on renewables and solar, that there is a race to the bottom. On the development phase, there is no budget allocations to have operational people involved. And actually their targets are opposite, because the construction and developers are trying to reduce costs as much as they can, and then operations will come in and probably have to do extra investments to correct some of the items. I understand this is a contradiction of a system view that we should have on these assets, but in my practice that is actually what happens. So your experience would be appreciated. Thank you.
I've seen this as well, Jose. So it's not a surprise that this question actually comes up, and I think this is where leaders need to rethink actually on where to invest in order to actually save money in the end, but also ensure that you either cut the cost on capex or the timeline as well. So I think it's quite important at some stage during the development that you bring in resources. It might not be the first thing, because we all know that in development you screen a lot of potential areas and projects, and not all of them will turn out to be projects where you can actually build them. But when you come in as far as that you're getting close to applying for permits and so on and so forth, it's important to have the project validated by the construction or engineering team or the operational team. And I think this is something that the company need to invest in. So very similar to an IPP that acquires a product which is ready to build, then you will actually invest quite a lot of money to do a proper due diligence on the project to see if this is the right product you want to invest in or not. So if you have basically development in-house, you should do the same thing. You should think about how you can utilize the experience from the other part of the organization in order to give you that kind of feedback and input, and also have a potential reason to say this product we can build it, but it's not for us for the long term. So, or you say let's scrap this project or sell it or whatever. So you have that opportunity. So it's more for the leaders to think about how and what kind of approach this should have to bring in this kind of experience. And another way of looking at this is not just on the development side, but it could actually be within an IPP that only operates projects. So here you might have different kind of departments that is looking at the performance and the cost cycle of these assets. So same thing there, you can build cross-functional collaborations with other departments to understand where to actually, you will either save a penny or increase the performance a bit as well. So I hope this helps, Jose. So.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's your insights are interesting for sure. Yeah, it's a challenging goal, nevertheless. Thank you.
So, and I think this is also where I see value of actually building this kind of aligned way of working to create this organizational culture from the beginning, because it will help getting that additional funding in development stage to ensure that you can actually build out this product the best way. So if you think about the maturity scale I showed, that if you only go up to a certain level, you will not be able to think about how you can optimize and extract more value. And that's where you come to operational excellence. So to some extent, it could be that it could be actually a conscious decision that we stop here. This is the way we want to do it. This is the way we know how to build a product. But if you then push slightly up the ladder or the scale, you might start to realize that this is actually an area where you can save a lot of money as well.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jose. We have via another channel one more question, Jimmy, that I wanted to highlight. It's a war story question. What practical example can you share with us where you have seen positive asset performance impact, which was attributed to the organizational culture?
Yeah. So no, thank you for that. So where have I seen that? Well, actually, I mentioned an example earlier where we actually took a decision on to train the different teams within the different organizations and get them through the same kind of training to actually build on the awareness. So, and the training was delivered by Hansson, so that was really good. And it was actually having combined product managers and construction managers together with asset managers and operations manager, all in the same room attending this training. And the discussion we had around the topics was amazing. And you could really see how the awareness within the room was building. So now they understood why they always get challenged on that, or why the construction team always have to take that decision to go ahead. So you actually overcome a lot of these kind of, I wouldn't say conflicts, that's not really the word I'm looking for there, but there's always some tension between different departments, and having a joint and collaborative environment and discussion around these topics actually helps to bring down that potential tension as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Again, thank you for the presentation and teaching us all about, I particularly liked organizational maturity. Talking about organizational maturity, while you were talking, I remembered a book I read about organizational maturity. I found it in my cupboard. It's difficult to show with the background on it. It's called The Management Shift. If you Google it, you could probably find it. The Management Shift by Vlatka Lupic, a professor at Ashurst Hult, created the 6-box model, which is about assessing and how you can understand organizational maturity in your own organization. So just as an added point, we are finishing off, which means that Jimmy, if you could stop sharing, I can share my screen for the last bit, which is just well, where do we go from here? Now, 2 points on that. First, the next session in our series will be the 30th of June. It will be at the same time as we did this session. So mark it in your calendar. You should, in the chat, get a link to that session. You will also receive an email afterwards where you will get more information about the polls and their answers. That was the data we got from that. So your answers will come back to you, so to speak. The session that will be on the 30th of June will be about specifically the impacts of commercial and contractual decisions on the asset performance and safety. So we will go deeper in the funnel and understanding how this all works. From my perspective, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to facilitate, and look forward to the next session to see you there. Bye for now.